There is no country in Europe more divided than Italy, not by war, but by the simple lines on a map. No matter what kind of map you look at, highways, religion, voter turnout, Exeter, one pattern repeats itself again and again. The North and the South are worlds apart. It's the kind of divide that goes far beyond just money or roads. It's built into the very identity of the nation itself. So how did Italy, a country famous for unity, culture, and history, end up so split in two? History. For over 1,000 years, Italy wasn't a country. It was a patchwork of kingdoms, city-states, and foreign-controlled regions. Ever since the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD, the Italian peninsula stayed broken up, ruled by outsiders like the French, Austrians, and Spanish. Each part of the land developed its own way of life, its own rules, and even its own economy, like they were growing up in separate worlds. The North had grown used to trade, industry, and outside influence from places like France and Austria. Meanwhile, the South had been ruled by the Bourbons, who kept power centralized and discouraged local development. So when Italy finally became a country in 1861, it wasn't starting from a blank page, it was stitching together pieces that had never really belonged. It wasn't a smooth blend, it was a rushed political project, led mostly by the North. In the North, places like Lombardy were already trading with Europe and building industries. But in the South, places like Naples were struggling with bad crops, poor roads, and poverty that made life hard for ordinary people. Even during revolts and protests before unification, different groups, farmers, students, workers, all wanted different things and couldn't agree on a shared goal. The people in the South may have voted to join, but many of them didn't feel part of the new Italy. That's why, even today, the North and South can feel more like distant neighbors than parts of the same country, because they never really had the chance to grow up together. Entrenched economic disparities. After Italy became a nation, the North didn't just continue to grow, it sped ahead. While the North was building machines, the South was still farming with outdated tools. Its land was harder to farm, its roads were fewer, and investors simply weren't interested. And because Italy doesn't have a lot of natural resources, it had to focus on manufacturing, which naturally grew fastest where conditions were best, the North. That created a serious imbalance. More factories in the North meant more jobs, more schools, and better hospitals, which attracted even more people and money. Meanwhile, the South began to lose its workers, especially the young and educated, who left for better opportunities up north or even across the ocean. This brain drain hurt the South deeply, not just in the short term, but for generations. Even today, the numbers paint a clear picture. Maps of GDP per capita and Human Development Index scores show a near-perfect divide, higher in the north, lower as you move south. Regions like Lombardy now earn as much as Germany or the UK. But in places like Calabria or Sicily, income is closer to countries like Uruguay or Greece. Unemployment in parts of the South is still 4 times higher than in the North, making life much harder for families trying to build a future. Cultural cleavages. At the time of unification, very few people actually spoke what we now call Italian. Most spoke their own dialects: Neapolitan in the south, Sicilian on the islands, Piedmontese in the north, and dozens more. These weren't just accents, they were so different, people from different regions often couldn't understand each other. Italian, based on the Tuscan dialect, didn't become widely spoken until the 20th century, when schools and radio slowly taught it across the country. But it wasn't just words that were different, it was ways of life. The North, shaped by its closeness to Central Europe, became more reserved and business-minded. The South, rooted in its Mediterranean traditions, stayed more family-centered, passionate, and deeply tied to local customs. From food to festivals, music to manners, Italy felt more like a continent than a country. Geography and natural disadvantages. So, by now, the picture is clear. History, culture, politics, all played a part in dividing Italy. But underneath all of that, there's something even more basic: geography. Northern Italy has a powerful natural advantage, the Po Valley. It's the largest flatland in southern Europe, stretching from the Alps to the Adriatic Sea. This plain is rich in rivers, soil, and space, the perfect conditions for farming, building cities, and moving goods. Nearly 17 million people live in this area today, about the same as the entire population of the Netherlands. The land is flat and easy to build on, And the north is also much closer to France, Switzerland, and Austria, making trade quicker and cheaper. This made the Po Valley the natural heart of Italy's agriculture and later, its industrial boom. Now compare that to the south. Much of the terrain is mountainous or rugged, harder to farm, harder to build on, and harder to connect with roads or railways. Water is also a serious problem. Drought and water stress are much more common in the south, limiting both agriculture and industry. So while the north grew strong on trade, rivers, and flat land, the south struggled against nature itself. And over time, those small natural differences grew into something much bigger, shaping where people live, how they work, and what kind of future they can expect. Ports, disasters, and energy. Then there's the risk of natural disasters. Southern Italy sits on the Apennine Fault Zone, one of the most earthquake-prone regions in Europe. Volcanoes like Mount Vesuvius, Etna, and Stromboli aren't just famous landmarks, they're active threats. This constant seismic risk makes it harder and more expensive to build lasting infrastructure or attract stable investment in the south. Northern Italy has another hidden advantage, the Alps. Those mountains supply fast-moving rivers, perfect for generating hydroelectric power. About 60% of Italy's hydroelectric energy comes from northern regions like Lombardy, Trentino, and Piedmont. That means cheaper, more reliable electricity, another reason why industries and businesses cluster in the north. Tourism gaps. Even tourism, one of Italy's biggest industries, shows the same split. It makes up about 10% of Italy's entire economy and supports over 1 million jobs. But in 2019, a full 60% of international tourists went to northern Italy. Only 15% chose the south, even though it's packed with historic towns, stunning coastlines, and ancient ruins. Barcelona alone gets nearly twice as many tourists as Naples, the south's largest city. And Spain's Balearic Islands, like Mallorca and Ibiza, draw more visitors each year than all of southern Italy combined. It's not because the south lacks beauty or history. It's that much of its potential remains underdeveloped and underpromoted. Improving roads, airports, and local services could help unlock this part of the country and give the south a chance to shine just as brightly as the north. Political fragmentation. Italy is officially one country with one central government in Rome. But beneath that, there are 20 regions, and 5 of them, including Sicily and Sardinia, have special autonomy, allowing them more control over local matters. This setup was meant to bring more balance and local power, especially to the south. But in reality, national parties still pull most of the strings, and regional voices often struggle to be heard. These kinds of political divides go far beyond north versus south. Even today, voting patterns, turnout, and party loyalty vary wildly by region. Italy has had dozens of governments since World War II, many of them short-lived, weak, or stuck in endless compromise. Left-wing parties often split into factions. Coalitions are fragile, and regional loyalties make it even harder to pass national reforms. Italy is one of the most beautiful and fascinating countries in the world, from the mountains of the north to the shores of the south. Every region has its own strengths, its own history, and its own story to tell. This video wasn't about saying one side is better than the other, but about understanding why these differences exist and how they've shaped the Italy we see today. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.